WSLS 10, celebrating 60 years.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is WSLS TV signing on the air on this December 11th, 1952, as Southwest Virginia's pioneer television station. This signing on the air of WSLS TV Channel 10 culminates years of planning to bring you, our viewers, the best in both national and local television programming.
That's how we signed on the air 6 decades ago, becoming the first television station in Virginia west of Richmond.
A lot has changed in that time, and tonight we look back at 60 years of WSLS history. Good evening to you. I'm Dawn Jeffries.
And I'm Jay Warren. Before we begin our broadcast, we do want to acknowledge what's been happening in Newtown, Connecticut. I'm sure many of you at home, as we've been doing here in our area and in the newsroom, have been watching the events unfold there, the tragedy really of 28 people dead there, many of them, at least 20 kindergarten students. It is a horrendous scene there, and our thoughts and prayers from our community go out to the community in Newtown, Connecticut tonight. We are broadcasting to you live tonight from the History Museum of Western Virginia in downtown Roanoke. Inside, you'll find links to Roanoke's past, including WSLS's own during the last half of the 20th century.
We are also at the very end of the Dickens of a Christmas parade going on right behind us here. You'll probably hear some of the activity as we go throughout this broadcast. Our WSLS team has a special float showcasing our 60 years of serving this community, and we'll have a closer look at that a little bit later tonight.
And we want to begin tonight at the beginning, really. We've already seen how we first went on the air some 60 years ago in 1952. But some of you may not know what Paul Harvey would say is the rest of the story.
WSLS 10's Karen McNew takes us back to the station's beginning, the founding, including really how our call letters came to be.
December 11th, 1952. 60 years can go by in a flash, and from the days of black and white television broadcasting to the rainbow colors of the peacock and the high-definition television of today, WSLS 10, the NBC affiliate in Roanoke, has come a long way, since it was the first TV station to broadcast west of Richmond. Starting out as a radio station owned by Shenandoah Life Insurance Company, company president Paul Buford had a vision that began in 1940. Back in the 1950s, the Today Show made a visit to Mill Mountain. WSLS became affiliated with the national broadcasting company, NBC, on June 12, 1955. Now, the star on top of Mill Mountain still provides one of the best views of the Roanoke Valley. Some things never change.
Things have certainly changed over the years, but one thing remains the same, and that's the WSLS commitment to work together with folks in our community to make a difference and to share the facts, get to the bottom of the stories that matter most to you.
We've come a long way since the days of radio and studios with pegboards for backgrounds. And the club quiz game shows. There are no tickets needed for our news these days. You can easily check us out from your own living room. And as you let us into your home, morning after morning and night after night, we thank you for being there with us.
Thanks for staying with us.
And hope to have at least another 60 more together.
That we do. And 5 years after WSLS signed on the air, construction began on the road that would really help transform this area, transform Southwest Virginia.
Of course, we're talking about Interstate 81, but at first, believe it or not, the signs that indicated it was an interstate didn't even have the number on it, only promising a future to come. Well, crews broke ground back in December of 1957, starting on a stretch from 1 mile north of the town of Buchanan to 1 mile south of the Rockbridge County line, according to VDOT's records.
4 miles of Interstate 81 opened by 1959 near Pulaski, and by November of 1963, 85 miles of highway was actually available for drivers. The interstate wasn't finished until July of 1987. That's when crews finished I-81, the I-77 overlap in Wythe County.
And let's fast forward to today. Interstate 81 in Virginia now stretches 325 miles from Bristol to just north of Winchester.
Construction is still part of the ongoing history of that road with the truck climbing lane project in Montgomery County and north of Lexington as well. And just as a lot of work went into building Interstate 81, a lot of work also went into building WSLS.
You can only imagine. WSLS 10's Natalie Fonz takes us back in time to some of our earliest employees.
Former WSLS employee Lee Garrett takes a tour of the downtown WSLS studios to check out all the changes since he's been here.
I'm glad to see there's a weatherman who is a weatherman.
You may remember Lee as one of the original weathermen here in 1953, but that was just the beginning of a very long career. Typical in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't just news that was broadcast from the WSLS studios. So too were many local programs, and Lee played several characters on them and was announcer and fill-in on Club Quiz until eventually settling into the role of news director before retiring in '87.
It was a long time, but it was a good time.
We invited Lee, along with Tom Huffman, a technical director of the time, and Charlie Boswell, a booth announcer, weatherman, and sports director, to sit down with us to tell us what life was like during the early years of WSLS 10.
Back in those days, we didn't have a very large news organization, and we'd send a reporter out. The reporter would set the camera up, start it, and run in front of the camera, do his bit, cut the camera off, come back to the studio, edit the film, bring it in, and get it on the air.
Film in those days made editing a tedious process, and sometimes would be cut just in the nick of time.
Whitey Robertson was the film photographer, and I've seen him run in the control room more than once with film just out of the processor and throw it up on a projector and they'd run it. It was that quick.
And it was all done live. Shows with characters like Ma Tide, Uncle Looney, and Cactus Joe Grant, all of whom had a way to make people laugh. And because of that, they became extremely popular, whether they liked it or not.
They fixed me up one time to do one show as Ma Tide. I was on there for a long, long time after that, being Ma Tide.
I love creative people, and in radio and TV, used to have, and still do, have creative people, and it's fun to work around creative people.
And with creativity, you get some very funny moments. Many of those moments the audience got to see, but many others they did not.
We used to play tricks on people, like on-air talent. The guy would be sitting up there, and we'd run in, sneak in under, and untie his shoes or tie them together.
We still do all our broadcasts live. The difference is back then they also used to do the commercials live.
There was an iconic personality on Channel 10, and that was Hayden Huddleston. There were a couple of these resin-based dinnerware sets that were unbreakable. I mean, the stuff was indestructible. So that was the crux of his commercial this one particular day on his live noon show. And they go to the commercial for this jewelry store, and he starts talking about this dinnerware. And he's holding the plate, and they've got all the cameras just right, and he's talking about how tough it is, and he says, watch. And he drops it, and of course the camera's on the spot, and it shatters into 1,000,000 pieces.
Spontaneous fun and always unpredictable. That was what was fun about watching those early years, because they loved what they did, and they did it well.
We've put together a special timeline of the station's history and some major news events in the past 60 years right on our website, WSLS.com.
And of course, some of that major news involved politics. And you know, the Obama-Romney matchup wasn't the first major election to target Southwest Virginia. Half a century ago, it was Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy courting your vote. And we cover both candidates' campaign stops here in the Star City.
Plus,
it caught everybody by surprise.
From massive floods to historic wind and snowstorms, a look back at some of the key weather events in our 60-year history.
But first, here's a quick look back at how we used to end the broadcast day more than 20 years ago.
This is Channel 10, WSLS TV, concluding another day of broadcast activity for Central and Southwest Virginia. Join us again later this morning when we will return to the air with another day of broadcasting on WSLS TV 10, Roanoke's first television station.
And it is snowing so hard, believe it or not, that the snow is actually covering the print literally while I stand here.
Scenes from the blizzard of 1993 as Southwest Virginia got a winter wallop.
That's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Nicknamed the storm of the century, Roanoke saw nearly 2.5 feet of snow.
And as you can imagine, whether it's snow, rain, wind, whatever it is, the weather has been a major part of what we've covered over the past 6 decades.
Yeah, we've really seen the range of extremes. Storm Team 10 Chief Meteorologist Jeff Hanowich takes a look back at several of the biggest weather events to impact our area.
WSLS has been around now for 60 years, and a lot has happened between now and then. One of the first pieces of weather video we have is from a tornado that touched down in Ivy, Virginia, which is in Albemarle County. It was one of 7 tornadoes that touched down on September 30th, 1959 in central Virginia, from the remnant low that was once Hurricane Gracie. By day's end, 12 people died from the storms on that fateful late September day. As we look back on the last 60 years of weather, 3 major events come to mind. First and foremost, the infamous flood of '85, then the flooding caused by Hurricane Isabel back in 2003, and of course something that resonates with all of us because it just happened, the June 29th derecho. The biggest floods we've ever had in our neck of the woods are from remnant moisture from decayed tropical storms. Think back to 2004 from Hurricane Ivan, 1972 from Hurricane Agnes, and 1969 from Hurricane Camille. But these did not compare to what happened in 1985.
It caught everybody by surprise.
November 4th and 5th, 1985, 2 days that will forever be remembered for Roanokers. The Roanoke Valley experienced the worst flooding it had ever known. Hurricane Juan left a path of destruction beginning in Louisiana, spreading north all the way into Canada. Juan's tropical moisture combined with another low pressure system bringing nearly a foot of rain to the area.
Here I am in the middle of downtown Roanoke with water up to my chest, staying up off the street, up on the curb so I'd be 5 or 6 inches higher, and the lights are still on.
The Roanoke River rose 23 feet above its banks, and 10 people died in Roanoke alone, with many more saved by rescue personnel. The flood of '85 caused $440 million in damage, and the storm came with little warning. Hurricane Isabel ranks as one of the most expensive disasters in Virginia's history. Throughout the Commonwealth, Isabel resulted in $1.85 billion in damage. The hurricane destroyed more than 1,100 homes and 60 businesses. Across the state, the hurricane generated more than 660,000 dump trucks of debris. While the absolute worst of the storm stayed to our east, towards the Hampton Roads area, we certainly had a good amount of damage here locally. Campbell, Amherst, Appomattox, Charlotte, and Pittsylvania counties all had reports of significant damage, but the worst hit area was certainly Rockbridge and Nelson counties.
The trail of water from right off the top of the knob there, and got where it's at now, and I don't know how it bypassed all of these trees.
The rainfall led to extensive flash flooding and river flooding, including along the South River. More than 60 homes were destroyed along the South River, and both Rockbridge County and Buena Vista were declared disaster areas.
The basement is totally flooded. The upstairs had about 2 foot of water, which meant all the carpet had to be pulled out. We have refrigerators that has mud in them.
Over 10 inches of rain fell in parts of Nelson County, and almost 7 inches fell across sections of Rockbridge County. Isabel made landfall along the Outer Banks, and at the time, I was a meteorologist at WNCT in Greenville, North Carolina, covering the storm. I remember remarking to my meteorologist colleagues at the time that the storm was not as bad as expected. Well, the reason for that was pretty simple. The worst of the storm was actually north of us, in the Commonwealth. The June 29th derecho was one of the most destructive and deadly fast-moving severe thunderstorm complexes in the history of the United States. It tracked across a large section of the Midwest, beginning in Iowa, eventually into the Appalachians, and mid-Atlantic late in the afternoon and into the evening. The day began for us with sunshine, much like what you see outside today. And man, was it ever hot. The high that day of 104 was as hot as we were all year long. And as we all know, the more heat you have, the more the air could potentially destabilize. And as that storm complex moved in from West Virginia, it just blossomed over our neck of the woods. Appalachian Power described the power outage that resulted from the storm as the worst they have ever dealt with. About 1 million customers lost power in Virginia, which was the largest power outage in the state's history not related to a hurricane. The strongest wind gust reported was 81 miles per hour at the Roanoke Regional Airport. I was off that day spending time with my newly born daughter. Once I saw the severity of the storm and the damage it did just in our neighborhood, I knew I had to come to work. Well, good luck with that. All roads leading to Roanoke were closed due to fallen trees or power lines. I finally did arrive, seeing firsthand all the destruction left behind from a storm that was overhead over one location for a total of maybe 20 minutes. And 9 days later, we got our power back.
From all that snow to one of the best places in our area, one of the more popular ones to beat the heat. It also began during our 60 years on the air.
Yeah, Appalachian Power actually seriously proposed the Smith Mountain Lake Dam back in the 1920s, but it wasn't until 1960 when construction began on the massive dams for Smith Mountain and Leesville Lakes. Workers finished some 3 years later.
According to APCO, crews poured 200,000 cubic feet of concrete to make those dams. That's a little more than 4.5 acres worth.
And today, Smith Mountain and Leesville Lakes combined are nearly 60 miles long and have 600 miles of shoreline. The dams can make enough electricity on average to power more than 630,000 homes.
Before they were presidents, Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy faced off as candidates.
During their 1960 campaigns, both came to Southwest Virginia. Coming up, we'll take you back to their stops here in the Star City.
Plus,
I remember standing at these windows right here praying for snow one night because I was doing weather and I had predicted snow. And
that's so funny. We catch up with some of the men and women who used to bring you the news and the weather about their favorite moments from their time here at WSLS.
Today, a dream has really come true.
You have raised a fitting memorial to D-Day, and you have put it in just the right place. Today, as America dedicates our D-Day memorial, we pray that our country will always be worthy of the courage that delivered us from evil and saved the free world. God bless America, and God bless the World War II generation.
The National D-Day Memorial dedication in 2001, just one of the times in WSLS's 60 years that a sitting president visited our region.
And then there are the elections, which chose the next man for America's highest office, including a famous one a half-century ago.
Yeah, back in 1960, then Vice President Richard Nixon, the Republican, and Democratic Senator out of Massachusetts, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, brought their campaigns to the Star City. Long before the razor-thin election of 2000 and decades before Virginia was a battleground state with near-constant visits from the candidates and hundreds of millions in campaign ads, there was the 1960 campaign between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, one of the closest in American history. And Virginia saw some of that action as well. Back then, the candidates were forced to campaign in all 50 states, not just the battleground states like we saw this year. That meant the candidates were going from sea to shining sea, including stops right here in Roanoke. Including this rally at Landrum Field 5 days before the election, all caught by WSLS 10 cameras. The Blue Ridge Mountains as a backdrop, thousands lined up with signs in hand, some of the women in what appear to be uniforms, dark shirts, white blouses, and old-style straw hats, all to see then-Senator John Kennedy. The footage shows Kennedy making his way through the crowd, mobbed by supporters, shaking hands and stopping to speak to reporters. At times, the scene was almost chaotic, already signs that Kennedy was a political rock star. His speech at the event hit a lot of Virginia notes. Take a listen.
If you come to this state with its long and ancient history, and I come here as one who knows Virginia, whose two brothers attended the University of Virginia, who feels at home in Virginia, who knows as a Democrat that he is among friends, and I come here and say, how could Virginia possibly put its confidence in Richard Milhous Nixon and the Republican Party in 1960.
Richard Nixon arrived in Roanoke to a calmer scene, greeted by supporters, including these women in Nixon dresses. His wife, Pat Nixon, came along with him. The venue for this rally, the historic Victory Stadium, where crews spent hours getting things prepped, the stage built, the grounds trimmed. At the actual event, a large sign welcomed Nixon to the Star City. He also campaigned in Richmond. This video from our WSLS archives shows him outside the Capitol Square. An animated young Nixon sounded themes very similar to what we just heard in the 2012 campaign.
And so I say, measure our platforms. In every instance you will find theirs cost more in money, and they also cost more in something that is much more precious than money, the potential freedoms of this country. Ours will produce the progress. Theirs will talk about it. You say, how do you know? Well, my answer is, my friends, look at the Eisenhower 7.5 years and compare them with the Truman in the 7.5 years, and whether it's in building schools or hospitals or increasing wages, real wages for our citizens, we have just done better than they have. They talk a good game, but we do a good game.
So went campaign 1960, where Virginia was once again a target for both campaigns. And I got to tell you, it was a lot of fun not only looking at that old footage, but seeing the candidates was fun, but seeing how much the valley has changed from the airport to Victory Stadium, it was really cool.
Hard to believe, really. It takes looking back at it like this to remember sometimes.
It's a different lens, put some perspective on it. Now let's fast forward a half century, and yet again, Southwest Virginia and really the entire Commonwealth played a pivotal role in a presidential campaign.
My fellow Virginians, please join me in welcoming the President of the United States, our President Barack Obama.
President Barack Obama rallied thousands at the historic city market in downtown Roanoke back in July. He ended up winning the city and Virginia in the elections for a second time, becoming the first Democrat since FDR to do so.
His Republican opponent, Mitt Romney, held 3 events in our region after winning the nomination, with stops in Salem, Roanoke County, and Lynchburg. Romney ended up winning 29 of the 36 cities and counties in the WSLS viewing area, but could not overcome the president's margins from Northern Virginia to carry the Commonwealth.
And for much of the race, as I'm sure you remember, our viewing area was in the top 10 in the entire country for political ad money spent.
You've watched a lot of anchors, a lot of meteorologists, reporters bringing you the news and weather through the 6 decades of WSLS history.
Announcing to the world that this tragedy had happened at Virginia Tech was, it was surreal.
Next, we'll check back in with some longtime former WSLS employees on some of their most memorable moments.
Plus, I'll look back at the lighter side of local television when it was produced here at the station.
You're watching the 60th anniversary special on WSLS Channel 10 Roanoke.
The spirit of Virginia.
This is Channel 10 First News with John Carlin, Leanne Necessary, meteorologist Bill Meck, and Greg Roberts.
Some familiar faces in that clip from 1995 to our longtime viewers.
Yeah, and if you're just joining us or you've been watching throughout our special, we want to welcome you back to our 60th anniversary special, everyone.
You know, John and Leanne teamed up on 2 different occasions during their careers on the anchor desk here at WSLS.
Yeah, and we've had a long line of people here. Of course, Bill Meck was one of our meteorologists that made a lot of memories throughout the year. He's the one who predicted very accurately that 1993 snowstorm we were just talking about.
That is a big accomplishment. Yeah. WSLS 10's Natalie Fonts got back in touch with some of those familiar faces to talk about their fond memories of working here at WSLS.
When watching television news, you sometimes can't help but grow to trust and get to know the people who deliver that news to you each night. And here at WSLS 10, there have been a number of wonderfully talented and dedicated people who did just that over the station's 60-year history. People you invited into your living room each night to tell you what was happening in your backyard and in your community.
I remember standing at these windows right here, praying for snow one night because I was doing weather and I had predicted snow. And
that was back in 1985 when Cindy Farmer was giving you your weather. She was here for 5 years before moving to North Carolina. Like most on-air talent in this business, she worked several different shifts and worked many different roles, but felt very fortunate for the opportunity.
I loved it here at Channel 10. I grew up in Southwest Virginia, so Roanoke was always like the big city for me, and getting a job here in the big city was a dream come true.
Former health team reporter Julie Bragg couldn't agree more. While she may have worked here for a short time in the mid-90s, her time here at WSLS impacted her life greatly.
When you start a job and you're that young, you're learning a lot professionally and you're learning a lot personally. You're really growing up. I'm lucky that I got to do that at Channel 10. And I'm lucky that I got to do that with John Carlin and Leanne Necessary. And they taught me so much. This is my son, Luke. Can you wave to everybody? I would have to say that Luke is really a product of WSLS because while working there, I met the man that I ended up marrying. Ben and I worked together at the station. In fact, he was the photographer when I fell down the hill at Cave Spring High School carrying gear on Friday Night Football.
Former WSLS main anchor and managing editor John Carlin spent 2 decades bringing you the news. Each night he told you the good and the bad in the community, and of course, those stories you'll never forget.
To be there with Karen and to be the people who were actually announcing to the world that this tragedy had happened at Virginia Tech was surreal. I mean, you couldn't believe that it was happening right here. And that you were the person who was talking about it. And as the numbers started to accumulate and we started to realize this isn't just a bad shooting, this is the worst shooting ever. And you had to maintain your composure and you had to get it right.
After covering that tragedy nonstop for several days, there was no other news story that touched John as much as the April 16th tragedy during his 21 years on air.
We were right in the heart of that story. And we won the Peabody Award for it, and that was very humbling.
One of the people we wish we could talk to again is former WSLS personality Greta Evans.
Yeah, Greta worked at WSLS for 25 years. She was the community face for us, really, in a lot of respects, and she passed away back in 2004 after battling cancer. You may remember her most from that community programming I was telling you about. What you may not know, though, is that she was also a chairperson for Roanoke City's sister city program with a town in Kenya.
She also wrote the Henry Street musical and helped children in need. Greta was a beloved member of WSLS and the Roanoke community.
You know, Don, you know, one of the first people that I met when I came to WSLS back in 1998 was Greta Evans. I was the 10 Listens reporter, and she was heading up all of our 10 Listens coverage. I will never forget how graciously she kind of welcomed me into the WSLS family, and that smile. She had the most beautiful smile.
Yeah, I never had the opportunity to work with her, but certainly got to meet her at some of our Christmas parties. She was always a fixture, always came back to our Christmas parties, and I remember making that connection with her and meeting her there.
We definitely miss Greta, that's for sure.
Well, in addition to bringing you the news of the day during the past 6 decades, WSLS works to serve the community in times of need.
Yeah, whether it's coat or toy drives or food drives, to helping raise money for relief efforts, sometimes here locally and sometimes in places far, far away. We're always there trying to help. But here's a look back at how WSLS and the community helped make a difference in the lives of others.
When Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast in 2005, the monster storm devastated a wide area of the Southeast. Thousands of people lost their homes in one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history. In addition to donating money and relief supplies, WSLS organized Operation Home Delivery with Habitat for Humanity. We, along with members of the community, helped build 4 homes for 4 families in Slidell, Louisiana, using the Roanoke Civic Center's parking lot as our build site.
Words on a paper can't express what I feel in the inside.
I can't wait to go back to Slidell and let them know the wonderful people that we have here.
You know, and it's exciting for me to get, you know, and it hurts that other people, you know, it's still lost. But I'm so thankful for this. I really am.
After the build, crews loaded up the homes into 2 tractor trailers and drove them south, then put up the new Habitat homes over the next year.
What's been the best part about being in your new home?
The best part
having something to come home to say is mine, and having everybody having their own room, my son and my daughter.
Years later, the families are still thankful for what you helped build.
I would like to thank them and I appreciate everything that they have done for me and my children, because if it wasn't for them, who knows what would be going on right now. So thanks to everybody.
WSLS launched another major relief effort in April of 2011, following the devastation caused by the tornadoes that ravaged Pulaski County.
I grew up on in this neighborhood, and today it looks like a war zone. I mean, trees are down everywhere.
We opened our WSLS Helpline Center to help the Red Cross collect relief donations.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Then hosted a special supply drive with the Salem Red Sox, Gleaning for the World, and Q99. The relief was much needed and appreciated by Pulaski families.
This is like gold to us right now. Everything we ask for is in that truck.
After Hurricane Sandy slammed the Northeast, WSLS in Southwest Virginia reached out to help again. We helped with the relief donation effort and followed crews up to New Jersey and New York as they brought help to families in need.
It touches your heart to think that people from so many states away would be interested to take the ride up here.
Those larger examples are in addition to our yearly Making a Difference efforts, including the annual juice drive and food drives to help Feeding America Southwest Virginia, as well as Relay for Life.
And our Making a Difference in the Community effort will help bring Christmas cheer to thousands of kids up in the Northeast.
That it will, because all this week we have teamed up with God's Pit Crew, Spirit FM, as well to collect toys for the children of Sandy victims as part of our special holiday haul.
Now, one truck has already left. It left today, going up to New York and New Jersey. Another will leave later this weekend with all the toys that have been collected from these church groups and from you in the community. We'll be handing them out to the families just in time for Christmas. It's a great project, and the generosity that has been shown from Southwest Virginians, I'm just astonished.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
This community always comes together and comes out and supports others. Yeah.
It's a great place to live, that's for sure. Well, the news is only a part of the 6 decades of coverage that we've had in history we've had here at WSLS. Up next, a trip back to the days when your favorite shows took place live in the studio.
Then history on parade. Great timing, a lot of screaming going on behind us right now. A look at the creation of the WSLS 60th anniversary float in this year's Dickens of a Christmas Parade.
Oh, how's everything, Ab?
Pretty good, Mr. Andy, I reckon. By the way, I met this fellow the other day. He wants to be a guest on our show.
A guest?
Yeah, see, he's got a great act.
Oh, an act.
He specializes in putting his right arm in this tiger's mouth.
Oh, that would be real fun for the show, Mr. Andy.
He wants to be a guest.
We could use Sounds kind of interesting. What does he call his act? What does he call himself?
He called himself Lefty.
WSLS history isn't only about the news. Live programming used to be a large part of what we aired.
Yeah, that included shows like Eb and Andy, Cactus Joe, and Uncle Looney.
Oh, good old Uncle Looney. And that tradition of live programming is still alive at WSLS with Daytime Blue Ridge every weekday at noon.
WSLS 10's Mike Wilson takes a look back at some of our more popular live shows.
Needless to say, TV has changed a lot over the last 60 years. Today, we fill the air with what's called syndicated programs like Inside Edition or Dr. Phil. But in 1952, there were no shows to syndicate. TV was brand new after all, so it was up to our TV forefathers to create their own programming. And starting in 1955, they started live TV programming right here in the building where we broadcast to this very day. One of the most remembered shows in those early days was called Eb and Andy. It featured the straight-laced Andy Peterson.
Gracious.
Welcome to the Eb and Andy Show.
And the moonshine-chugging, country music-singing Eb Tide.
And howdy out there in TV land.
The show certainly seems dated to us in the 21st century, but in its day, it made local celebrities of its 2 stars in a show that's still talked about to this day. And over here, where Jay and Karen do the news every night, back in the day, kids filled the room. That's when Uncle Looney interviewed kids and introduced the latest cartoons. The show ran from the 1950s through the early 1960s. In fact, many of you watching right now may very well remember being on that show as a child, a memory that you no doubt cherish. And before Bob Barker and before there was a weather center in this corner, WSLS made its own game shows. They featured local contestants with prizes from local merchants. It was right here in this room that claim to fame and the show most remembered, Club Quiz aired. WSLS was the first station to ever hit the air in Roanoke, and from day one, WSLS has been committed to bringing you quality programming and quality news. And nowadays, while most live TV is reserved simply for the news, we here at WSLS are continuing a long tradition of live TV. Every day we have fun, informative, quality TV right here at noon on Daytime Blue Ridge. And while it's in color, that's about the only thing that's changed. And as Uncle Looney would be happy to tell you if he were still around, when it comes to live TV, anything can happen. And let's face it, it usually does.
Yeah, that's happened on my shift quite a few times.
Absolutely the truth.
You never know. And the 60 years of television on WSLS is actually the theme behind our float in this year's Dickens of a Christmas Parade.
Yeah, our team behind the float worked long and hard on its design. Take a look at the finished product there. People watching tonight's parade will see themselves on TV as the float drives by. That's pretty cool.
That is cool, but they thought they were on, you know, live.
The news.
But here we are.
Absolutely. Well, there are some stories that really just stick out in your mind when you've covered the news as long as we have.
I did a story on a mailman who was running over trash cans in the neighborhood. To this day, I will never forget the sound of that truck hitting the garbage cans. Yeah, a lot of people remember that one. Just one of our favorite memories from our time at the station that we'll share with you up next.
Virginia's only news in high definition. This is WSLS 10.
Good afternoon.
HD programming is common now, but not 6 years ago when we officially became the first location here in Southwest Virginia to broadcast the news in high definition.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah. Well, Dawn and I were just adding up. You've been at the station now 12 years?
Yes, going on 13.
Yeah, and I'm going on 15 years here at WSLS. And that was, of course, long before we transitioned to HD.
Again, a good thing.
Yeah, I know.
Both of us actually came here from the same station in Mississippi. Yeah. And along with Kara McNew and Jeff Hanowich, there are a lot of stories that really stick out because we've seen and experienced a lot.
We have. So here's a look back at some of the memorable stories that stick out in our minds from our part of WSLS's history.
I grew up watching WSLS, being from Blacksburg, and while I was at Virginia Tech, I could only hope that I would get to work at this station one day. My most memorable moment was when I got the phone call for the interview for the morning show here. And now, almost 15 years later, boy, have we grown. There are so many things that WSLS is a part of, and I'm so proud to be a part of that. One of my most memorable stories, and there are so many that come to mind, is the one I did on a teeny little baby born in Stewart. She was the size of a Beanie Baby while she was born, and I was so honored to be recognized for a regional Edward R. Murrow for that story. And that was the beginning of a long 4 months. I would have to thank that family for allowing me into their home. And that's what I rely on with so many people when it comes to telling health stories.
Some of the more lighthearted stories or interesting stories I've covered. The Queen coming to the Commonwealth was a lot of fun to cover in Richmond and Williamsburg. I've covered every election since 1998. Red, white, and blue everywhere. They are definitely getting ready for this inauguration. The impeachment of Bill Clinton. Some of those have been much more interesting to see how the Commonwealth has gone from non-battleground, non-entity in these presidential races to all of a sudden now the battleground state, and how we're seeing all these presidential candidates and vice presidential candidates visiting here. All of that has been a very interesting watch. One of the big things that I've noticed that's a difference in the Roanoke Valley is how people are actually working together in communities. Now Roanoke County and Roanoke City are working together on a water development plan. They're working together on economic development. You have Virginia Tech and Montgomery County working together with Carilion to build a medical school here. So there seems to be much more of a regional focus now than there was even 10 or 15 years ago when I first got here. And that's been very great to see.
Well, I've been here since 2003, and the thing that stands out most for me here at WSLS are the people of Southwest Virginia. They are so kind, they are so welcoming. And I can honestly say this place feels more like home than any other place I've ever lived in my entire lifetime. As far as a weather event that I remember most, it was definitely the Pulaski tornado back a couple of years ago. I covered the event the day after, and to see the sheer amount of love and compassion people had for one another in Pulaski and in Draper was just amazing to me. One family stands out more than anything, and that was the Bishop family. Their house was completely destroyed. I cannot tell you how kind and welcoming and sweet this family was. I will never forget them for as long as I live. And then after Draper, we went to Pulaski. And as we all know, there was one part of the town of Pulaski completely destroyed by the tornado. We were there, and we saw everybody working together like I've never seen before. It's that kind of teamwork and that kind of community feel that makes me so proud to be a proud citizen of Southwest and Central Virginia.
I started in January 2000, and my very first weekend, we covered a huge story. A 16-year-old girl was missing. It was snowing. I had just moved here from Mississippi and did not have snow boots. The whole community came together searching for this girl. And it was a story that I covered from beginning to end, from when she was missing until the trial for her killer, covering big national stories for our community and really bringing home the significance to us. I've been able to cover the USS Cole bombing, September 11th in New York, and the DC sniper shootings. And it's really amazing the connections that you make. There have also been some off-the-wall stories. There's certainly some memorable stories. I did a story on a mailman who was running over trash cans.
People on Crestwood Drive know when their mailman is coming.
To this day, I will never forget the sound of that truck hitting the garbage cans. I remember Borat singing the national anthem at the Salem Civic Center, and come to find out, our news clip from that ended up on like the outtakes or something.
I'm Janae Sack. Don Jeffries has tonight off.
And I thought, I am so glad I wasn't working that day. But certainly glad I'm here tonight. And believe it or not everything happens as planned when you're live on the air.
Boy, is that the understatement. It can take 1, 2, 3, or multiple takes to actually get everything just perfect to get it on the air the way we present it to you every day and every night. And then, of course, there is the unexpected that you can't control.
And we thought you would enjoy all of that, so we put a special link, a look at some of the lighter moments that you don't get to see all the time. You'll find it on our WSLS YouTube page.
And we've also put together a special timeline of the station's history and some major news events of the past 60 years as well.
This has been fun.
It has been fun. And looking back at history from where we started to where we are today, we've learned a lot too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us and taking this journey back through 60 years right along with us.
Now, there are a lot of people, Dawn, that helped get all this on the air. And I mean, truly, this was a station-wide effort. It doesn't matter what department we're talking about here. Behind the cameras, folks, to make this very special and to get everything on the air. And we'd like to give them a special thanks as well.
And also a very special thank you to the University of Virginia Library, which has helped preserve and reformat our old news film collection. And that's thanks to a grant, actually, from the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Yeah. In fact, some of my footage for the presidential election came from that, which is pretty
very
cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you Monday morning on WSLS 10 Today.
And I'll see you tonight on WSLS 10 at 11. Good night, everybody.
Good night.